Begin the current Daf Mesechtas Moed Katan Daf. We begin on the bottom of Yom Beis. 4 lines up on the bottom of the Yom. We begin the third parak Mesechtas Moed Katan, parak Moed Katan, which continues on the theme of the previous parakim of the Tzarchi Moed, and that also segues into the laws of Avelus, which certain malachas that we're talking about, if they're permitted on Chol Moed, that they would be forbidden for a mourning. Shir's corresponding to Cheskel, turning to the Daf Yomi, that is joining us for today's Daf. Something we're going to discuss in today's Daf as we begin the third parak in Mesechtas Moed Katan, the parak of Moed Katan, are Isur L'Galech B'Moed, forbidden to take a haircut on Chol Moed, except for certain individuals. They were not able to cut their hair before Yom Tov. Regarding Habom and Mimdin Zayam, someone who is traveling right up to Yom Tov, the Gemara differentiates depending on the reason for his trip. If a baby that's born with long hair that bothers it, but is permitted to cut its hair, Chalamayid, the halachas of various individuals on Chalamayid, including an oval, whether an oval observes the laws of mourning on Yom Tov, Menuda, whether someone who is excommunicated observes these halachas of Chalamayid, and Mitzayra, whether Mitzayra observes all the restrictions on Chalamayid. And to Tispires, we discuss whether various individuals are permitted to cut their hair. So we begin the current Daf Yotalin, on the bottom of Yud Gimel Moed. 4 lines up on the bottom of the Yom. We begin the third parak ve'el Megalchem. So which this parak has a lot of the laws of Avelus, and this is that parak that is the source for those halachas. Says the Mishnah, ve'el Megalchem Moed. These are those that are allowed to take a haircut on Chol Moed. They are Habam Midin Sayam. If someone came from overseas on Chol Moed, now since it was beyond his control that he couldn't have taken the hair before that because he was out of town, so when he comes on Chol Moed, he's allowed to take a haircut. If he was in the house of captivity, he was a captive. But if he was let out of jail, which he couldn't cut his hair before that, as Taisa says, because they don't let him take a haircut in jail. Or even if they let him take a haircut in jail, it's not so gishmak. So this is Taisa Lashon from the Yerushalmi is ina arav la'adam legalech b'eisa. So it's not so gishmak to get a haircut in jail. I don't know why, but al kapon them it's considered an oinus that when he finally comes back on Chol Moed, he can take a haircut. And also, if someone was excommunicated, where the sages undid his nidui on Chol Moed, he can go and which as a menuda he couldn't take a haircut. Now he can take a haircut. So let's say someone had taken a vow not to take a haircut, and then on Chol Moed he goes to the Ruv and he says, okay, you don't have to keep that neder anymore. Now he's able to take. So up until now, like a situation of blindness, he can take a haircut on Chol Moed, and meaning behutra, and he was permitted. Now, another case is v'hanazir v'hamitzayra that go mitum asay l'torasay. What does that mean to say? If let's say you have a nazir, one of the prohibitions he has is becoming tummy. What happens if a nazir becomes tummy? The halacha is when he finally is finished with his tumah and he purifies himself, he takes a haircut, and then again he has to start over his nazirus again. So when he's going from the state of tumah to tahara, there's a halacha to take a haircut to start over again his nazir. So to Mitzayra, Mitzayra is always Tumah. When he comes out of his Tumah, so then he takes a haircut. So we say that they can take the haircut on Chol Moed because they didn't have an opportunity before the Yom Tov. They're just coming out of their Tumah to Tahara right now, which necessitates a haircut. They can take their haircut on Chol Moed also. That's regarding haircuts. The Mishnah continues, the following individuals are allowed to do laundry on Chol Moed. Again, someone was overseas, he was a captive, he was in jail, so you turn the top of Yadalam and Aleph, or someone that was a state of Nidui and the Chacham permitted the Nidui, if someone went to the Chacham and said, I had a neder, I'm not going to do laundry, but then he permits his neder on Chol Moed. All these individuals are allowed to do laundry. Now, then even for regular people, the following items are also allowed to have laundry, to be laundered. Mitpaches hayadayim, which are these towels that people wash that they wipe their hands in when they're eating, or mitpaches hasvarm. It's actually two different girsas. It's either the word is svarm, which is the cloth that is used to wrap the sefer, or it's actually mitpaches saparim. Saparim are barbers. It's actually the cloth that the barber puts on the shoulders of the person who's getting the haircut. Now, why you're washing those clothes, who's getting haircuts, is for those who came from overseas or let out of jail, that they are allowed to get haircuts in Chol Moed. So those cloths are allowed to be laundered, even though you even washed it before Yom Tov, because they constantly have to be washed because they get dirty. So things that get dirty are allowed to be washed on Chol Moed. And Umitpaches Hasafag, which is that which people dry their face and their hands and their feet all day, or when they come out of the bath, like the word of Olav and Nistapik, it's what you use to dry yourself up with. Or Hazavin, which a male who had a discharge became Mazav, Hazavis, and Vahanidois, a menstruating woman, Vayol, woman gave birth, or whoever's coming out from the state of Tumah to Tahara. Allah is they're permitted to wash their garments which has their Tumah. You're allowed to go ahead and wash and do laundry on them on Chol Shemayim. But Sharkal Adam Asurin, these two halachas that we said in the Mishnah of taking a haircut, doing laundry, is only for these individuals and items mentioned. But everyone else is forbidden to get a haircut and to do laundry on Chol Shemayim. So the Gemara says, opening up with that last halacha, what's the reason why everyone else is forbidden to take a haircut and to do laundry on Chol Shemayim? So the Gemara, it's like we learned the Mishnah Masechtas Tainis. We're going to relate a similar halacha. Mishnah says over there, Anshe Mishmer, the men of the Mishmer, which are the Kahanim, split into 24 groups, and every family does one day, and then a whole group does 1 week, and every 24 weeks you then go back and do it again. So he said the people of the Mishmer of Anshe Maimed, which is similar to those of the Yisraelim that are split into 24 groups to be over the carbon, Asur and Lasap L'chabes, they're not allowed to get a haircut and do laundry during the week of their Mishmer. But on Thursday, they cover the Shabbos because that's already for the next Shabbos already. That was what the Mishnah said. He says, Maitem, what's the reason why you can't get a haircut or go do laundry in that week? Is Kadeshli come to the Mishmartam, Kashem in the Val. We don't want them coming into the Mishmar when they're in the state of disgrace, where their clothing is dirty and they didn't get a haircut. So by saying that you're not going to be able to take a haircut or do laundry, people will make sure they do it beforehand. That's the same thing in our Mishnah. We don't want people coming in to the Yom Tov when they're in a state of disgrace. And therefore, one who is negligent and did not get a haircut before the Yom Tov, and then it's time he has to take a haircut in the Yom Tov, the Rabbanu was stringent since the person was not diligent to make sure he gets a haircut before the Yom Tov, so that he didn't come in a state of disgrace. Because if you would let him take a haircut at Chol Moed, people say, wouldn't take a haircut before Yom Tov, he'd come in a state of disgrace, and therefore that's why he said, no, you're not allowed to take a haircut and do laundry on Chol Shemayim. Now, but that's the following question. You told me a whole bunch of individuals that it's an oinus for them. I was overseas, he was in jail, he didn't have an option. So he said, okay, you're oinus, we'll let you take a haircut on Chol Shemayim. Now, Bayim has the following question. What's an Abdullah Aveda Erverdego? What happens if a person lost his Rolex? Erev Yom Tov, he got all dressed, he gets in the Yom Tov clothing, went to the mikveh, he can't find his Rolex. He's looking around all day, Erev Yom Tov, he didn't get a chance to go get the haircut he was supposed to go to the barber at 11 o'clock, this and that. He can't find it. Now, Kivan to on this mutter, do you say since it was beyond his control, he's an oinus, like all these other individuals, so he'd be permitted to take haircut of Chol Shemayim? Maybe no. It's not obvious. Not everybody knows that it was an oinus. They're going to say, he deliberately pushed it off. He's till Chol Shemayim, and therefore you're not allowed to take a haircut of Chol Shemayim. What would the halacha be? So Abaya says that Yomi, people are going to say, Kol HaSadikin, all the decorated matzahs are asurin, are forbidden, and Sriki Baisis Mutarin, and the decorated matzahs of Baisis are permitted. What is this referring to? What are we saying? Baisis was an individual. He knew how to carve out his breads without a delay. And the reason is because he had a machine. He had a print. And therefore, when he would bake his matzahs by shaping it and writing Tom's River on his matzahs, it wouldn't make it into chametz because it was very easy to do it because he just had a printing press and he would just press down. Even so, Chazal said his matzahs are forbidden to do that. Why? Because people are going to say, no, generally, if you would try to mark out in your doughs, it's going to take too long. It's going to be not the 18 minutes, it's going to be more than that. So it's going to be chametz thing. But it doesn't take a long time. But people are going to say, what? His matzahs are okay and everyone else's matzahs are not okay. People are not going to know to differentiate. So essentially what the Gemara is saying here also, that since not everyone knows that he couldn't find his watch on Erev Yom Tov, people are going to say, what? Everyone's not allowed to take a haircut? Are he allowed to take a haircut? because these people came from overseas and the people were in jail, so people know about that. But this person, not everyone's going to know, and therefore we would not let him go ahead and take a haircut of Chol Hashanah. On that,
did take a haircut.
What?
What about if you did take a haircut?
And then you need another one, like the shaving. It's like the tshuva emotion with the trimming, whatever. If that would be different.
You don't have the shleikon to happen.
Right. I think that's similar to what we talk about trimming. He does it every single day, so that's not a problem of when it comes to Kishim Navam. I hear, like Kohen Gudel has said, we take every single day. I hear, good shayla. Well, so it says the Gemara Tameich, but then the Gemara answers back to Abaya. And Abaya wants to say that it wouldn't be mutter, but according to your reasoning, Had Amar Rabbi Asi Amar Rabbi Yechina. He says the following halacha: Kol mishe'ein ela cholek echad. If someone only has one article of clothing, where not everybody knows that he only has that same shirt. They think maybe he has 10 of those same shirts. Not everyone knows he has only one shirt. But still, Rabbi Yechina said the mutter lechabse b'chol Shabbat. You're allowed to wash it on Chol HaMoed. Where, so the Gemara wonders, Hasam Nami, there also, people are going to say, Kalasrika Nasrun, where everyone's decorated matzahs are forbidden. Again, it's just a phrase that people would use. And Struki Baisis Matern and the decorated matzah Baisis are permitted. Meaning, in other words, to say, why don't you say the same thing over there? You're telling me these halachas of haircuts and laundry. You're telling me that, we know the guy was in jail, okay, when everyone could find that he's taking his stuff to the laundromat. Everyone knows Nebuch, he was incarcerated for 7 years. He got out just in time, minutes before Yom Tov. They drove him in. Everyone's, good to have you back, whatever. Chalmai is doing laundry, this guy who has one shirt, and you see him suddenly washing it in the river, saying, what's going on? Why don't you say the same time that you're saying that the guy who lost his Rolex in the Erev Yom Tov, that you don't let him take a haircut because not everyone knows. Not everyone knows this guy has one shirt. So the Gemara says, no, not true. Everyone actually does know he has one shirt. Why? Allah, we learned on that halacha. Ramah Ravashi qualifies, he says, because Izuri Mechichlav, his belt proves it. Why? Someone only has one shirt, so he takes it off, and he's like wearing an undershirt. And now he has to keep it stuffed together by tying it with his belt, and he's washing his shirt. So everyone realizes that he only has one shirt, because it sounds like whatever they would wear, it wouldn't stay together unless he has this belt to keep it together. But you see evident that his shirt is the one thing he's doing because he needs the belt to keep this cloak on him, because he doesn't have a shirt. So like to put like a shmat over him and he's like tying it with a belt. The point is that belt will show that obviously he doesn't have nacha hemed. So it is obvious, and therefore that's why you let him go and do it. Now, a different version of the previous question, Rav Ashi Masni, he taught that Boyab Zeir had asked, specifically Uman, a professional, like a barber, which everyone comes to him in Erev Yom Tov. And there's like lines out the door, everyone waits for the last second, everyone's waiting over there, and he lost something Erev Yom Tov, and it's beyond his control, and he couldn't give himself a haircut, because usually the barber gives himself the haircut after everyone else. He goes zoom, 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 and he's done. So the question now, what would the halacha be? What's the halacha especially over here? Yeah, because keeping the uman, since he's a professional, mucha milsid, then it's obvious because everyone knows, everyone heard about it, everyone's in town, he was the barber, and no one was able to get, they knew that he was perturbed that he lost his watch. Like, but maybe no, keeping like mucha milsid ki hanach. It's still not as strong of a concept as the other ones in the Mishnah, which those people said they could take a haircut because everybody knows. Everyone that's on the front page that these guys were let out of jail. So everyone knows. But here, okay, a lot of people maybe know, but it's not as muchach as the guys who came from overseas or were let out of jail. So loy. So maybe you would say that no, you cannot take your haircut on Chol. So you want to take a little sense. It's not clear what the halacha would be by this barber who lost his watch and he's looking for it on Erev Yom Tov and he couldn't go ahead and cut his hair because mama's down to the minute he was looking for the watch. Would we let him take a haircut on Chol Hashanah or not? It's not so clear. And again, but the Taisa just points out that we say this idea of if you have only one shirt, you're allowed to wash a Chol HaMoed. That's just a source he brings from the Yerushalmi, a classic halacha, big dikatanim, children's clothing. We know you're allowed to wash a Chol HaMoed because it's recognizable that it's children's clothing and they get dirty. So it's like you only have one shirt because it's constantly getting dirty. It's like the halachas of the Mishnah of these hand towels are constantly getting dirty. So that's just the source for that halacha that we wash children's clothing on Chol Hashanah. Now, we said in the Mishnah that one of the individuals that's permitted to take a haircut, permitted to do laundry, is someone who came in Medina Ziyam, came from overseas, right? I mean, they help, generally coming from overseas was a much bigger thing than it is in today's times. So someone comes from Medina Ziyam, he comes and he was a oinus, so he couldn't have done anything, so now he could take a haircut of Chalash Hamayit. So the Gemara says, Masin like Rabbi Yehuda, our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda. Why? If I learn the Bryce of Yehuda, he says, if someone came from overseas, he says, Lo yigalech. So obviously our Mishnah is not like him. He says, you cannot take a haircut, because he left without permission. What does that mean? Rashi explains. It means since he went, he went and he didn't go b'shus acheim. He didn't go with other people's permission. Rather, he went with his own ratzon. Meaning to say that he was not an oinus. So when it says without rishus, it just means without other people, without other people's domain. I mean, it wasn't because of other people. He went on his own volition. What? That what he made his nazirs? So he's saying the fact that he made himself a nazir was not necessary. But the Lamaisa, once he was a nazir, so he's saying over here also the fact that he left. I hear. Unless maybe nazir is a mitzvah, maybe nazir. Yeah, good child. Why is a nazir any different? You made it on yourself, you didn't have to. Unless maybe that's a mitzvah, because we're going to see actually those are the qualifications we're going to do right now about what this that you made it on yourself. So actually the Gemara qualifies right now. But first, Rabbi Yehuda says he's obviously not like the Halacha Mishnah because he says no, he can't take a haircut because, I mean, maybe he would disagree with Nazir. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda. We're saying he's not the town of our Mishnah anyway. He says Yatza. He went with Shalai B'Shus, and our Mishnah holds that no, you could go ahead and take a haircut even though you left not through someone else's domain, even on your own. But Amar Rabbi, he first qualifies this, and he actually says like this. He says Lashud, if someone left town unnecessarily. He went for sightseeing. He went just to tour to Galavant to see the world, and he came back on Chol Hamoed. Everyone agrees it's forbidden him to such a person to take haircut of Chol Hamoed because that was unnecessary. So that's not going to be making you as an oinus. Now, if he went l'mizoinus, if he went because he had to parnusa, he had to provide food for his family, he didn't have what to eat, and he comes back on Yom Tiv. So everyone's going to agree that he's allowed to take a haircut of Chol Hamoed because that was an oinus. He has no break. He has to travel out. People are traveling, flying all over the place. They have to nursing homes, whatever it is. They have to provide for their family. So that of course he could. The only dispute that they're having regarding if you came from Nin Siyam or not is the guy has a lot of estates. He has a lot of money. He goes out because he wants to make more money, and therefore he traveled far overseas. That's the machlekes. Rabbi Yehuda is medami le'kiloshot. He compares that to like just taking a tour and going on a yacht and just going for pleasure. That you didn't need to go. So you want to make another million, or that's why you're going for it? That's not an excuse. That's not considered an oinus, and therefore you wouldn't be able to take care of it in Chol Hamoed. But the Chum compare it to, and it seems like that's the halacha, like mezainis, because I need to put food on the table. So what? And suddenly I make $10. I have enough food for the day. I don't have to go to work anymore. Halabai was like that. I have to constantly be staying relevant and making more money. So therefore that is considered like mezainis. But that's the halacha of our Mishnah that said that if you came from overseas, if you went for to make a whole new development somewhere out in the East Indies, whatever it is that would also be considered as a oinus. That's a Rava qualifies the machlekes. However, Meishav, the Gemara is from the following brayso that seems to indicate not the way Rava just qualified. Amar Rebbe said regarding this machlekes, if you come from overseas, if you're allowed to take your Chol Hamoed or not, he says like this. He says Nirin de Rabbi Yehuda. He says it appears to me the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that he holds you cannot take a haircut if you came from overseas on Chol Hamoed. If you left not from other people's dominion, but rather you left on your own. But I hold of the words of the sages that hold it's permitted to take a haircut of Chol Hamoed. When you left, when you had to, like through someone else's domain. So the Gemara says, "My shaloi b'shus." When Rebbe said he likes the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, when you went shaloi b'shus, that then the halacha would be that would be us to take a haircut. What does that mean, shaloi b'shus? If you think means saying he left shaloi b'shus, meaning not through other people, meaning he didn't go because something he had to do, Rather, he left with just because he wanted to do some sightseeing. But you, Rabbi, you said that everyone holds that would be asa to take a haircut. So why is Rebbe saying it appears to me the words of Rabbi Yehuda, but I'm agreeing in that case too that it's going to be asa? Okay, so obviously be'el mazaynis. Rather, you're going to say, what does it mean shalei b'shus? It means without permission. It means because you went just to make a parnasa. You said everyone holds actually they would be mutter, even Rabbi Yehuda. So that can't be when you like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. El b'shita, obviously, it's la harvicha, it's the Goldilocks, it's in the middle, it's the one that's for making profit. And that's what Rebbe's saying. He likes Rabbi Yehuda that says, yeah, that's considered like lashud, like you're just going to sightsee, something that's not necessary. We not take a haircut on Chol Shemai. Problem is, now how do we read the second half of that brisa? Because Rebbe then said, Niran divrei chachamim, it appears to me the words of the sages, when you left with permission. The question is, my b'shus, what does it mean b'shus? Ilim and the Mazayin says three categories basically we're speaking about. We're speaking about Mazayinus on one end, Lashur to just stroll and sightsee on the other end, and somewhere in the middle was Lar Harvacha to make profit. That was like that gray area. So when he likes the opinion of the Chachamim, when you left Bershus, that it's going to be permitted to take Yerger Chol Shemayid, what does it mean? Ilim and the Mazayin everything, it means because he needs food to put on the table. You said everyone holds there it's going to be mutter. Not only the Chachamim, even Rabbi Yehuda. The El Arvichas, obviously, it means to say that Rishus means to say you're doing it to make more money. And that's what you're saying, it's like the Chachamim. The problem is, you just said that was obviously what it meant in the Reish of the Brisa, that you like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda over here. Because that's how the way you explained what it meant Shalei Rishus. So now we have a contradiction in the inferences of what Rebbe is coming to say. In the Reish, he likes Rabbi Yehuda that says you're not allowed to go for Havach. I mean, if you went for Havach, you're not take a haircut. At the Sefer, he likes the words of Chacham that say you're permitted to take haircut when you went just to make profit. Rather, obviously, you could infer from this brisa that it's not the way Rava had said that they don't disagree by Lashut and Mazaynis, and obviously that is where they do disagree. Because how do you translate the brisa? It doesn't make sense. What do you mean you like him b'shus and him shalei b'shus? There's only one case that they disagree about, and you're telling me that you like that opinion then and that opinion then. There must be two different cases at least. Says no, it's not true, it's not difficult. It's exactly like we said. But this is what Rebbe is saying in the Brisa. He's not saying his own heterim, his own opinions. He's not saying, Royani, I see this opinion then, I see that opinion then. He's actually just coming to qualify the machlekes, what case are they disagreeing about? And he's saying like this. Niran de Rabbi Yehuda wasn't nirali, it's Niran de Rabbi Yehuda l'Rabbanan. Even the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda says, you now take a haircut on Chol Shemayid, that appears even correct to his disputants, the Rabbanan. When do the Rabbanan agree to Rabbi Yehuda to be Aser? When you live without Rishus. Umayni, what's that case? Lashon. What do you have? What rech do you have to go ahead and just go stroll and go sightseeing the world and come back on Yom Tov and say, oh, I was an Einis, I couldn't take a haircut? No. Because even the Chacham don't disagree only when you're going for profit. Of a lashut, but just to go stroll around overseas, that they agree. You're going backpacking, you have no other excuse. That no, of course, you're not taking a haircut on Chol Shemayid. Then, when it says he likes the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, it wasn't for him. That even the Rabbanan, their opinion seems correct even to Rabbi Yehuda, that he would agree there would be mutter, when you're left with Rishus. Mind you, what's that? Lemazaynis, when you need to put food on the table. Because Rabbi Yehuda doesn't disagree with them, only when it's just to make a profit. But when you need to put food on the table, he would agree that that's a einis, and that even he would agree that when you come back al Chol Shemayid, you're allowed to take a haircut. So therefore, it doesn't contradict the premise of how Rava explained. Now, a related halacha to this halacha of our mission about taking a haircut al Chol Shemayid for those who are einis, so Amar Shmuel, he says, Katan Daf b'Moed. Baruch Hashem, so that a mazel tov, the baby's born on Chol Moed. The baby has large hair. Sometimes babies are born with a full head of hair. So mutter legalez b'Moed. So you're allowed to cut that hair on Chol Shemayid, the hair on the baby's head that is paining the baby. Why? There's no greater court jail than being in the mother's womb where it was an einus. You couldn't cut the baby's hair because the baby was in the mother's womb. So it's just like when you got out of jail and it's your first opportunity to take a haircut, you'd be allowed to cut the baby's hair on Chol Shemayid. So the Gemara makes a deep. Wait, it sounds like you're telling me b'Moed in. Only if the baby was born on Chol Shemayid. But Mekar Lai. But if let's say the baby was born before Yom Tov, then you wouldn't be able to cut the baby's hair on Chol Shemayid because you were able to cut it before the Yom Tov. that Master Rabbi Pinchas asks from the following brisa. The brisa says an important klal. Kol elu sha'amr mutar legalech b'moed. All those that we say that they're allowed to take a haircut on cholosh moed. Someone came from overseas. Someone was in jail. So too mutar legalech b'me'evle. Those individuals are allowed to also cut their hair during the days of mourning. Someone's in Shiva, and someone's in the days of Avelis, and he comes back from overseas. He's allowed to go ahead and cut his hair. He didn't have an opportunity beforehand. So although you don't take a haircut on Chalash and Moed, and you don't take a haircut during the days of Avelis, these individuals would be allowed to. Now, it says the Gemara the following diak. It sounds like, now if you're not allowed to take a haircut on Chalash and Moed, would sound like, so then then you now take a haircut during the days of mourning. That's what the inference seems to say. The inference. However, as you continue on the base, this is the Gemara's question. Moed Katan is big plukta. Now, if you're going to say that regarding a child, there is a difference that if he's born before Yom Tiv, then you tell me he cannot take a haircut on the Yom Tiv. So then we could say, since he's forbidden to take a haircut on the Chol HaShamayid, that would sound like then, based on the dictum we just said, that he would not be able to take a haircut either during the days of his mourning. But then it comes out, that means you're telling me that there's a laws of mourning that applies to a child. But by the time when the Bryce said it's not true. Mekatan lo katan, a person should not see this, but sometimes there's a lavaya, and you have little children that are avelim. They tear the garment of the child, but it's only when they agmas nefesh. It's only because we want people who see this to cry. That increases the honor of the dead, but not because there's a chiv of avelis of kriya on the child. We only tear his garment so that everyone knows, oh Nebuch, look at this, even a small little kid, Nebuch, what's going on? That's why we do it. So you see that there is no laws of avelis on a child.
Yeah, but by cutting the hair, isn't the Islam nikah on the market?
What do you mean? We're talking about the cut.
So about cotton, maybe he's allowed to, but the person's cutting the hair is not allowed to.
You talking about when on which one, on the avelis or the chol moed? That what, to cut his hair? We're saying that you're not allowed to cut his hair.
Maybe he would be allowed to cut his hair. Maybe it's not a right because he would be allowed.
Why would they not be allowed to cut it if he's allowed to? The barber that's allowed to give the haircut to the guy who came in and didn't say,
the barber's not allowed to cut hair on.
But I'm saying obviously whoever's cutting. Yeah, we're not really talking about the barber over here. Whichever barber, it's a guy or it's a yid that's allowed to, because it's schad that doesn't have work to do or whatever, doesn't have food. Whoever's allowed to give the haircut could give the haircut because the child doesn't have any laws of avelis. So if he doesn't have any laws of avelis, then they shouldn't have the issur of chalamai, because if you tell me that there's certain times you can't take a haircut on chalamai, that means that you're telling me he has the laws of avelis. But there is no laws of avelis. So how can you tell me that a child could have a situation that he can't take a haircut on Chol HaShamayid? So Amar Rashi, he says, no, Miktani, did we learn such a deek that you're saying ha'asurin? That you want to tell me that whoever is not allowed to take a haircut on Chol HaShamayid, that for sure he's then going to be asked to take a haircut during his days of mourning? No. Dilma maybe yesh mehen asur, that other people, they would be forbidden to take a haircut on Chol HaShamayid. They're forbidden to take a haircut during the days of mourning. But yesh mehen mutter, but those that would be permitted, like this child, who yes, is born before the Yom Tov, he's not taking a haircut on Yom Tov, he would be allowed to take it during his days of mourning. We're just saying that, but everyone who doesn't have an Isra of Chol HaMoed does not have an Isra on days of mourning. But the inverse, not necessarily as absolute, could be. But if you are not allowed to take a haircut on Chol HaMoed, maybe you're not allowed to take a haircut during your days of Avelis. But some people, like a cut, would be allowed to, and that doesn't contradict what we said, that if the child's born before Yom Tov, then you would not be allowed to cut his hair on Chol HaMoed. Or another version, a Maimer, Ritam, some say it was Rav Sheshem Breid of Idi, Masni Hachi, he taught it as follows. Amar Shmuel, actually a different version. Shmuel says, cut mutter legalcha b'moed, and this seems to be the halacha, that child, you're allowed to cut his hair on Chol HaMoed. Loishna neil b'moed, loishna neil mikara. No, not like the first version. It doesn't make a difference if he was born on Chol HaMoed or was born beforehand. The child does not have this isser of having his hair cut. And Amar Pinchas, like in the first version, but instead of asking a question, this version obviously wants to say Afanana Matanina. Well, this seems to be supported from the following brisa. And the brisa says, all those people that we said that they're allowed to take hair Chol HaShamayid, like meaning from overseas, and for the one that was in jail, they're allowed to take their haircut also in the days of mourning. Now the inference is, the diak is asur legalech b'moed. If they cannot take a haircut on Chol HaShamayid, then asur legalech b'moed, they would not be allowed to take a haircut in the days of mourning. Now, if you would think to say that katan aser, that the child's forbidden to go ahead and take a haircut on Chol Moed, meaning at least if let's say he was born before the Yom Tov, so nimtzas avilas neges b'katan. That would sound like then you would have laws of mourning by a child. But B'tanya in the Brayse of Mekar l'katan, when we tear the child's garment is only the agmas nevesh, because we want people to be disheartened and people to be crying over the person who passed away, but not that there's any intrinsic laws of avilas for a minor. Obviously there's no avilas for katan, so obviously there's no isser of taking a haircut on Chol Moed for the child, and therefore that proves this version of Shmuel that says the child is always allowed to take a haircut on Chol Moed. Which Rav Ashi says, no, Mikatani did relearn, just like rejected in the first version. Do we say ha-asurin, but that if it's forbidden, then they're all going to be forbidden? No. The yeshman also, the yeshman mutter, maybe some would be also, some would be mutter. And again, there's no raya to this version. So we have these two different versions, and it wouldn't be a question, and neither would be a raya if a child could not take a haircut if he was born before Chol Moed. Now, continuing on this theme regarding what we mentioned as the laws of mourning segue into the laws of Chol Moed. So it says the Gemara, Avil, a mourner, he does not have his halachas of mourning on the Yom Tov. Well, how do we know this? Remember, it says the pasuk in the Dvarim. It says, "V'samachta b'chakecha." You should rejoice in your holiday. You're supposed to be happy and not mourning. Now, as the Gemara explains, if it's a mourning that you had from before, the person, the Levi, was a few days before Yom Tov, so that, because Asa Sederam, you have a mitzvah say of the public, which is B'samachta, which is all of Klal Yisrael, and that overrides a positive commandment that's just on the individual, the mourner. Because as Rashi brings a pasuk in Yomei, we find that Abel Yachar Asilach. A mourning is a very individual experience, and that it's considered a positive commandment of the individual. So Seder Rabban pushes away the Seder Yachar. And V'avelis Tahashter, actually, if it's a mourning that happened right now on Chol Moed, well then Lo Yasa Seder Yachar B'Docha Seder Rabban. Then for sure you could not have the pre-existing condition of the Seder Rabban to have that Seder Yachid override that. So either way, you're not going to have the laws of Avelis on Yom Tov. Now, there's a few categories that we're going to be discussing, that we keep on asking questions related to them, are the next one like Menuda. We're going to have also the same qualifications of its categorization of Menuda. Someone who's in the state of Nidui. He's excommunicated because he didn't listen to the court's judgment. Ma'oshinig Niduya B'Regel. The halacha is, Menuda has certain halachas. What's halacha? Does he have to have those halachas of also tsar on the Yom Tov? Some of you, so he says, Tashma, I'll bring a raya for the following brisa that he does have his halachas of nidur on Chol Moed. Because a brisa tells us that Danadin Nefashas, that on Chol Moed we judge capital punishment cases, not on Yom Tov itself, because you're not allowed to, because it's rabbinically forbidden, as the Mishnah says in Mesechus Bay. You're not allowed to be done, you're not to have court cases, but on Chol Moed, which you could have a court case, you judge even capital punishment, b'dinei makas, or regarding lashes, or b'dinei mamonos regarding monetary cases. Now, the inference from that brisa is, from the fact that you have these court cases on Chol Moed, obviously, that v'ilei tzayis if the person would not listen to the judgment regarding the monetary case, Allah would be mishabtinle. We would excommunicate him on Chol Moed, because that's how it always works. If a person doesn't listen to the court, we put him a cher. Now, if you would entertain to say that the halacha nidur does not apply in Yom Tov on Chol Moed, so meshumid v'asim yikara. So if someone was already pre-existing in Chayer, Asir Regel Dachil, the Yom Tov comes ahead and pushes it away, that the halacha nidur does not apply at all. So Hashtem Shamtim Le'anan, you think we're going to put him into Chayer on Chol Moed? Obviously, from the fact that we're having these court cases and we need to be able to have the tool of the court to put him in Chayer, obviously that means the halachas of nidur do apply, because if it wouldn't apply, then we wouldn't be able to put him in the first place, obviously, on Chol Moed, and then what would be the point of having the court case if no one's going to listen on Chol Moed anyway? To which Abai says it's not a proof, because the dilma may be that this that we said in that brisa that we have these court cases, it's not that we tell the people, oh, you're chayiv and you're zakai, which you want to infer from that if you wouldn't listen, we put him to chayrim. No, maybe it's just liyun the bidine. Maybe just the judges, they get together and they start looking at all the data. They don't say anything at all. So they never really come to that situation that you could prove that if they are going to be meshamed or not, because they're just going to look into it. It takes a long time, court cases. You start, okay, let's have all the paperwork, let's have all the evidence, let me hear from your lawyer, let me have all that. So maybe that's what they do in Chol Moed. And the Gemara actually says, I'll prove this to you, says Abai. If you don't say this, that's not about finishing the case. It's just about just looking into it. Then din nefashis diktani. One of the other cases was that they could judge capital punishment in case of chol shemayim. Hachanami dekatla. You think they actually follow through on the judgment, actually execute someone chol shemayim? It can't be, because then the judges are not going to be able to have simchas yomtiv. Why? Katan to learn a brisa, which is interesting. That's what they're concerned about. That they're not concerned about the actual execution itself, that it's a malacha, but they're concerned about the judge's simchas yomtiv. So learn a brisa. He says, Sanhedrin. How do we know regarding the Sanhedrin, the high court? Shahargos a nefesh, that if they executed someone, sheim termin kol yisayim, they're not allowed to eat anything that whole day. How do you know this? Tamalim, because it's the pasuk mikol yisaychel aladam, which one of the ways you can read it is don't eat when you spill blood. So when the judges are executing someone, they're not allowed to eat all day. So wait a second, how could you have din nefashis? What's going to be with the chalamayid sida? You're supposed to have some chazamtiv. You can't eat the whole day. So Ella obviously doesn't mean to actually finish up the court case and execute him. It means liyan bedin. It means to look into his case. So liyan bedin here also means looking into his case. And if you have no raya that you are going to make his nidui on chalamayid from the fact that you have in court cases that the whole tool that you have the power is to make him nidui. No, maybe you're not coming to that situation. You're only looking into the case. Which Amalei Ravisa said back to Abaya, no, it's not true. It can't be like you're saying. Because if that's the case, that you're saying that they're just going to look into it, Nimtzis ma'anas dina, comes that you're afflicting his judgment, because when they don't tell him his verdict right away, that they looked into, so that's what's called inadin. It's afflicting the person, where the person on shpilkis, and the person has an ongoing IRS investigation, loyal lining, loyal lechem, or whatever it is, right? People on shpilkis, it's a major tzar, it's an isser in the Torah, being ma'anas adin. And so as the Girsa of the Rashi has the word Ella, so rather obviously, if we're saying we're done in Dinoi, it means to say we obviously finished the case on Chol HaShemayim. And then yes, we could be medayik from that. That if he doesn't listen, obviously we're going to put him in Chayr. And then therefore you could obviously infer that obviously his nida does apply on Yom. Okay, then this that you said, if that's the case, that then what are you going to do? If you're finishing the case of Din Mamanis and you're proving that Nidu is applying on Regel, then what do you do with the other case of Din Nefashis? How do you follow through on that and execute someone, but the judge is not going to be able to eat that whole day? He says, no problem. He says, because Asum Mitzafa, what they do is like this. The judges come in the morning, Ma'ani Medine, and they look into the guilty party to see if he really, let's say, is liable for a chiv misa. Then va'ayli va'achli v'shasi kuliyam, and then they go back home and they eat and they drink all day. And then they come by right before sundown. And they finish his verdict with cutly and then they execute him. So it's not a problem. You can't eat that all day. No problem. The day's over now. They ate and drank all day. So it could be, like Rabbi Yisrael said, and he proves this, the halacha of nidu does apply on Yom Tov, as we see, because it must be when you're done the din mamnis, it must be that you actually finish the verdict, or else it would be inad din. What do you do with din nefashis? Yeah, no problem. They'll be able to have the simchas Yom Tov because they'll look in, then they'll eat, and then right before Shkia they can decide and they're going to execute it. But Abai says Tashma, he wants to bring a right from our Mishnah that when it talks about those who could take a haircut, a chol shemayim, we said one of the cases was umenuda she'etir lechacham, that the one who had nidui, which the chacham permitted it for him. Now, the assumption of Abai is that, what does it mean? Because every menuda the chacham permitted is nidui on regular, because the halachas of nidui do not apply on Yom Tov. So you see, not like Rabbi Yisrael. Some Rabbi says, what are you talking about? Miktani she'etiruhu chachamim? Are the words in the Mishnah that the chacham permitted it, like as if it's a carte blanche, like it's automatic? No, she'etiru loy chacham ketani. The words are that they permitted for him. What does that mean? They permitted him, meaning generally neither does apply on Chol Shemayim. To the contrary. So why are they permitting just for him? Because the Azla Faisal about Dina, because the individual went and he appeased his litigant on the Yom Tiv, and he went and paid up his debt. He came in front of the rabbis, who's the courts in that generation, and they permitted. Okay, why? The whole point we put you in chayim was because you weren't listening to the verdict and you weren't paying up the 3.4 million that you owed this guy, and you paid him, no problem. Therefore, that we may matter his nidui on chalash may. But the conclusion of the Gemara is that there is nidui that's noyig b'regel. Next category that also we're going to continuously compare them is mitzayr. Someone has tzaras. So ma'ashayani tzarat b'regel. What's the halacha? Does he have to act as a mitzayra on the Yom Tov, meaning that he's not allowed to come into the machna, he's not allowed to take a haircut? What's the halacha with the mitzayra? So my Bible says, Tashma to make it right from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said that these two individuals, when they come out mitumasi l'tarasai, when they're coming out from, let's say, the Nazir who became tummy because he came in contact with a mess, or Mitzvah who was intrinsically tummy, when he's finally finishing his days of tzaras and he's becoming tar, there's halacha that they're allowed to go ahead and take their haircut. Now, it sounds like Habemei Tumasai, but during the days of his tumah, it sounds like the nohig that would apply, that he would have his halachas of tzaras on the Yom Tov. You only tell me that he doesn't have these halachas and is allowed to take the haircut when he's coming out from tumah tahara. But it sounds like, but if he has his tumah of tzaras, then it would apply. That seems to indicate clearly that it does apply. So no, it's not a raya. Let me buy you come. You could actually say that the Mishnah is telling us what we don't have to say, that it's saying what we do have to say. In other words, I don't have to tell you when he's actually in the days of tumah of his tzaras. No, maybe actually he would not have to have the halachas of Mitzvah on Chol HaShamayim. But maybe you would have thought to say that when he's actually becoming tahar, we would make a gezerah. What gezerah? Make a gezerah that he cannot take a haircut of Chol HaShamayim. You know why? Because once he takes a haircut, he has to bring his carbon. Both the Nazir who finally became tahar, and he has to bring a carbon and start over his nazirs, and both the Mitzvah who's becoming tahar after his Mitzvah has to bring a carbon. The problem is, if we let you take a haircut and now you're obligated to bring a carbon, Shema Yisha Karbanaisim, now you might delay bringing your karbanis till the last days of Yom Tov, because you're like, okay, anyways, after now I'm on my Cholamoy trips, but on Yom Tov I'll be there anyways, and I bring the karbonis, I'll bring it then. Problem is, you're not allowed to bring on Yom Tov a carbon of a yachid. Karbanis sibur they bring, but not that of the individual. So maybe you would have thought to say that actually when he goes into Masa Tarasai, that actually we would not let you take a haircut, because then you might realize you have to bring your karbanis, and you're going to delay bringing it till the last days of Yom Tov, and then you're going to be over bringing a carbon yachid on Yom Tov. Kamash Malan, that's what telling you that no, that even there, it's going to be permitted for him to take a haircut on Chol HaShamayim. We're not saying because someone who's a Mitzvah is not allowed to the contrary. Mitzvah is actually allowed to, because the halacha that a Mitzvah is not to take a haircut does not apply on Chol HaShamayim, and he's allowed to go ahead and come into the machana and take a haircut on Chol HaShamayim. It's just lima boy coming, so it's not a raya. So Rabbi says Tashma is being a raya for the following brisa. Pasuk says in Vayikra, it says V'hatzirua, the one who has tzaras, which actually by hanega, the pasuk says that he has a nega in him, so he has to tear his garments, he has to let his hair grow long, he has to cover his head up until his lips, and he calls out, Tameh, I'm Tameh, I'm Tameh. Okay. But the thing is, the word tzeru is really extra, because it says Ashabai hanega, that he has in him a nega. Obviously, if you're a tzeru, you have inside a nega. So what do you do with this extra word about tzeru? It says the Brisa, that's L'Rabbis Kohen Gadol. That comes to include even the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, that even he has the halachas of tzeras. Now, says the Gemara like this: the Kohen Gadol l'chol hashana. The Kohen Gadol, his status all year round is kiregel kol yama, dummy. He's really what a yid is on the Yom Tov is what the Kohen Gadol is all year round. Why? Because we learned the Mishnah in Haris that says Kohen Gadol makrav einim. Kohen Gadol is allowed to bring a carbon when he's an einim, which is the day that his relative passed away. How do we know this? So we know this because when Aaron said to Moshe, "What? You think I ate the chatas today? None of you passed away today." Now he didn't tell Moshe, "What? Ve'kraft? Do you think I was makrav today?" He only said, "Do you think I ate today?" The inference is that he was allowed to be makrav even as an einim. So we learn from there that a Kohen Gadol, which is what Aaron is allowed to be makrav as an einim. But everyone else, no. Every other day of the year, an einim is not allowed to send his karbanos. As the Gemara says later on, the reason why it's called shlamim is because when the person is shalom, when he's whole. Now, when he's an einim, which is he's missing something, which is his relative. Now, but on the Yom Tiv, an einim is allowed to send his karbanos. Now, a Kohen Gadol, who's an einim, can sacrifice all year round. So essentially, you're telling me that a Kohen Gadol on every day of the year is what an einim is on what an einim is on Yom Tiv. So essentially, a Kohen Gadol every day is like every person on the Yom Tiv. But ve'ina eichel, although the Kohen Gadol is marker, he cannot eat. But one thing is, we see his whole year is like how our Yom Tiv is. Now, we said that the Kohen Gadol has the halachas of tzaras. Obviously we can infer from there that no tzaratoi, that the halacha of mitzvah of a regular mitzvah applies beregel. Because a Kohen Gadol against you is a stamma yid of Yom Tiv. like receiving the laws of Oina, to be makar carbon. So if a Kohen Gadol has the laws of Tzeras, obviously Stam Yid on Yom Tov also has the halachas of Mitzayra, and he would not be permitted to take a haircut, he would not be permitted to come into the matna, and that would apply even on Yom Tov. Thank you to Anytime for hosting us.